I'll just introduce Bill now. I'll go get him some water. Bill, another of our distinguished writers of Capilano College's English department. His latest book, Motor Therapy, marvelous book, and before that, Mimosa and Chameleon. Bill writes out of a very strong imagination of where he came from. And where he came from is such a large part of the makings of his, as I see, his personality now. And I don't mean where necessarily in terms of locale, but where in terms of operations, right? A kind of site of operations, which Bill brings to his writing and does it so beautifully. So please welcome Bill Schermbrucker.
Thank you, Sharon. Oh, that's fine. Thank you. I finished a novel in last fall in October. And I had promised it to my publisher in October, and it didn't seem quite done yet, so I kept working on it, and I didn't call him. And eventually the end of December, I was satisfied with it, and so I took it down to him. And he said to me, he was alone in the publishing house. It was sort of in that Christmassy sort of time, when some offices are closed and so on. I went in there, he was all alone, and he wanted to talk, and it was odd. He's the president of the publishing company who's my editor at Talon Books. He wanted to talk. And so he started asking me, what's this novel about? And I said, this is very strange, Usually the writer is wanting to tell the editor what the novel's about, and the editor's saying, leave me alone, just give me the bloody manuscript and go away, I'll read it in my own time. And then he said to me, have you worked on it to the point where you've got it as good as you can get it? And I said, yeah. And I went away and I thought about that remark. I thought, what did he mean by that, Did he mean that my last book had been a flop or something, or the returns had been coming in, or what? So I haven't heard from him since then. I'm waiting, so impatiently, but we'll see what happens. This novel came out of a sense that people don't really understand what happened here in 1968 and 69 and 1970 and 1971. So I attempted to recreate it fictionally. Of course, the book contains everything I can remember and everything I can research, and it's got that disclaimer at the front that says it's all fiction and nobody's real. Okay, so I think you'll get it if I just read a little bit. It has an epigraph. Sound, please. See them swaying there. What's her name? Marilyn McCoo. Well, I have a cleaning lady who comes from Burma. She just speaks a little bit of English. Well, not too bad, but and so I was playing The Fifth Dimension to get in the mood when I was writing this book. And she comes in one day and she, hello, oh, yo, listening to Marilyn McCoo? I thought, wow. How does she get to know? You know the song, don't you? When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. I imagine that part of the reason Carl hasn't got back to me is it would be impossible to get all the permissions on all the music that I've crammed in here. Prologue. All right, watching the clock now. As my daughter jumped into the car to come home from her grade 5 class, she had a question. Dad, she said, Sarah told me a weird thing at recess today. Uh-huh. She said in the 60s or the hippies or something, Women used to burn their underwear? Not hippies, I said, not all their underwear, just their bras. Some women did. At the supper table, she said, why would anyone want to burn her bra? I looked and saw her nose wrinkled up as at one of life's expectations having been stolen from her. A lot of people did a lot of unusual things in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. Her brother, my stepson, chortled, strikes at universities. They had students holding up picket signs to keep the job recruiters from coming on campus. My stepson has recently dropped out of university. He says it's only temporary for one semester because he couldn't get the courses he wanted. Seriously, his friend said, they stopped recruiters from coming on campus to offer people jobs? Seriously. Wow. What are you guys talking about? My daughter said. I was asking Dad about women burning their underwear. Now you're talking about jobs or something. It's all connected, I said hastily. It's part of what was happening. And if those things hadn't happened, your world wouldn't be the way it is now. I wish, said my stepson. Listen, it's not like you think. There are freedoms you have now that you wouldn't if we hadn't fought those battles. Yeah, right, exactly. Freedom from employment, freedom from oxygen, freedom from the hope of ever being able to afford to buy a house. Why don't you write a book about it? 2 days later, I was driving home from work when the American author of a book on gender discrimination was being interviewed on CBC radio. What about the bra burning that took place in the 60s, she was asked. Well, that's been so exaggerated, she said with a sharp annoyance. I think men have done that. It's been elevated to the level of myth, and it's entirely irrelevant. The fact is, you know, maybe one woman burned her bra in Atlantic City. Some say one, some say not even one. But the media have picked it up over the years as a sensational detail. They've used it to obscure the real goals of the women's liberation movement, which are all about access to employment and positions of power and equal pay and improved daycare and reduction in family violence. Instead of those central issues, which truly make a difference in women's lives, you get the fixated male media of the 70s. And even today, look at you asking me this question, peddling the trivial picture of crowds of crazy women all over North America chanting around bonfires and flinging expensive brassieres into the flame. That's not what happened at all. When I got home, my wife Laura asked me, did you hear the piece on the radio about bra burning? I did. Well, she said, well, what? Are you going to issue a correction to the kids? There's nothing to correct, I said. That woman on the radio doesn't know what she's talking about. Oh, and I suppose you do. Listen, I said, the Americans sometimes think significant events happen only in their country. These are the people who call their national baseball competition the World Series. That woman may know what went on in Atlantic City, but I was right here in Vancouver, and I know what happened here. That night I lay in bed thinking and remembered Gennady and Ayub. It was a long time ago. It seemed like yesterday. So then, October 1968, he picks her up hitchhiking. Everybody hitchhiked in those days, and the relationship begins. And they become friends, these two, Alistair and Gennady. And they discuss intimate details of their lives with one another, the way you do when you're hitchhiking, you know, because you're never going to see the person again. But they do see when they become friends. And at this point, I'm just going to read a little bit where he goes to Edmonton to stay with her and is going to meet her famous lover, a guy from India by the name of Ayub Hassan. So he arrives there. His car has no heat. It's 30 below on the Fahrenheit. I sat down and began to pull off my gumboots, but the left one was stuck. My foot was frozen to the sock, and the sock was frozen to the boot. Eventually, when I got it off, I washed my feet and put on fresh work socks. I sat in the dining nook and ate the bacon and eggs that Gennady had cooked, and then she showed me to the spare bedroom. I put my head on the pillow and was instantly dreaming of the old days in Kenya, the Mau Mau hacking people to death, the Kiambu police station with 6 terrorist corpses propped up against the barbed wire enclosure where suspects were held awaiting screening interviews. I felt the chill of horror at those grisly dead bodies, heads lolling in different directions, bloodied limbs and blood-soaked rags arrayed in a most untidy demonstration. The prisoners, squatting on their heels inside that cold wire cage, were all huddled at the far end, away from the dead. And looking back at the bodies, I noticed again how the gray-black skin of the dead Kikuyus had turned bluish in death, bruise-colored, and nobody had bothered to wash away the gore. They were covered with flies. I pedaled my bike away from the police station as fast as I could, wiping the sight from memory. I woke with a shock. The little bright-eyed man was standing over my bed with a mug of coffee, his beard full and intensely dark against the pale skin of his face. I get a lot of criticism for doing voices. It's apparently not correct to do voices. Alistair, I'm Ayub. You like to have coffee? Thanks. Nice to meet you finally. Salam alaikum. He laughed and shook my hand. You say that so strangely, he said. Aslam alaikum. Alaikum aslam. Well, I'm an African, I said. We have our ways of saying things. He sat on the edge of the bed, asking me about my trip. Right away, I was astonished by him. I suppose I had not thought of Ayub as a person before. He had been a force, a potential enemy. I was Gennedy's friend, and this was the guy who might or might not be screwing up her life. But as we talked, I felt more and more at home with him. At the lunch table, I said, you know, Ayub, I came here expecting to find you a stranger, but I suddenly feel we have a lot in common. Why not? He said, with his marked accent. Why not? We are both products of British colonialism. We probably have many cultural similarities. I looked at his belt, striped elastic cotton with 3 colored bands and an S-buckle. It reminded me of my uniform belt at the Nairobi primary school. You're both men, damn it, Gennady laughed scornfully and swung her long blonde hair over her shoulder. It's got nothing to do with colonialism. Ayub looked at her with a cold frown. Now I have to take a shower, he said. Alistair, you know what is the thing I most appreciate about North American life, or high-rise life anyway? Showers? Man, it's that the hot water never runs out. You can shower forever in high-rise. Hot tap is limitless. That's what I call true luxury. Well, that's just a glimpse of Ayub, and then I'm going to read you a chapter, which is chapter 14 in the book. This book is called Crossing Second Narrows, and the real-life friend on whom this was based was coming down. I was living in Deep Cove, and I was trying to explain to him how to get to my place, and I told him, get to the Second Narrows Bridge, and then it's easy to get to Deep Cove from Second Narrows Bridge. Well, he got lost. He was about 4 hours late, and it only turned out months later that I had said to him, if you get lost, just stop and ask someone, how do I get to the Second Narrows Bridge? So months later it transpired, the reason he had not stopped and asked his way was he felt too foolish. He said, how am I going to know where is Second Narrow Bridge when I don't even know where is First Narrow Bridge? So it became a joke between us. All right, so this is not right. 217, sorry. So Ayub gets hired at a university which I have called here the University of New Westminster. He joins a strike in the PSA department there. And the beginning of this chapter is a little bit slow. I know that. But if you can imagine that you've been going through some fast-paced action now, and here comes a little sort of pause, right? It was 1970, and the age of Aquarius was turning sour. LBJ's vision of a great society resting on liberty and abundance for all had gutted out, and the world focused angrily on the Americans and why they were in Vietnam. Woodstock was over. The slogan, if it feels good, do it, already had a quaint, old-fashioned sound to it. Timothy Leary was still preaching that everybody should get high, and the Beatles was screaming, why don't we do it in the road? But some people were beginning to wonder where in the hell the road led to, if it led anywhere at all. Mick Jagger could get no satisfaction. Bob Dylan, switching back and forth from his gritty voice to his wailing harmonica, taunted the establishment that something mysterious was going on down on Desolation Row, and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? For every letter of the alphabet, new words rolled out of our mouths that year. Acid head and be in. Charlie and dovish. Earthscape, as seen from the moon. You see we're going through the alphabet here. Flower child. Groupthink. Handgun entered the dictionary in 1970. IUD. Jetbus. Kiki and lip sync. Macro. The New Left. One-liner and pulsar. We began to read about quarks and rodeos, spelled with an A for trucks. Speed reading, thalidomide, uptight, video recorder, whitey, Malcolm X, to yo-yo, and to zap, meaning kill. Quite a few people had been zapped. Martin Luther King sang, "I ain't gonna study war no more." He was killed on a balcony in Memphis. That led to the riots erupting in 126 US cities, where 46 people died, hundreds were injured, and 21,000 arrested. 2 months later, in the midst of his campaign for the Democratic nomination, Bobby Kennedy was shot in the head in California, and his body lay in state in St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York, while 1 million people filed tearfully by. Hendrix was dead. Janis Joplin dead. Rode out on a mainline trail, sang Joan Baez. Richard Nixon presided over an angry and divided country. Talk about yo-yoing. Nixon was bombing the shit out of the enemy even as he pulled back the troops. We were grasping defeat out of the jaws of victory, said Robert Ross, founding member of the Students for a Democratic Society. America, love it or leave it, read the bumper stickers. And on the 30th of April, when I turned on my old black and white TV and watched the president lie to the world about the bombing of Cambodia, frowning like an angry preacher, I knew we had entered a new age of discontent. Then the 4 white kids were gunned down by the National Guard on the hill above Taylor Hall in Kent State University. White soldiers killing white students, and we knew it would have to be brought to an end soon. We wondered if things would have to get worse before they started getting better. Now we're back into the story. A week passed, and no word of a decision on Al Waldy. The day of Ayub's suspension hearing dawned bright and sunny. Vancouver seemed paradisal. How do you say that? Paradisal? With snow on the mountains and the clear blue cutouts of the Gulf Islands on the horizon. Driving over the Second Narrows Bridge, that's what the novel is called, crossing Second Narrows. Driving over the Second Narrows Bridge, I saw small fiberglass runabouts racing one another on the glassy waters, motors kicking up white rooster tails, but the boats barely progressing against the strong riptide. I could still taste the sweet grapefruit I'd had for breakfast as I pulled into the university and paid my 50 cents to park all day. I sat in the middle of the wood-paneled lecture room next to Ayub's hand-holding pair of students. One of them's a long-time member of the political studies faculty here now. The original upon whom this fictional character is based. Ayub in the front row nodded at me and smiled, looking tense. He and Gennady were surrounded by heavy political colleagues, and I counted 7 lawyers crowded in the front benches. I recognized President Barrington and Dean Marshall from their photos in the paper. There were a couple of reporters with tape recorders and notebooks, and there was an audience of 40 or 50 people. 3 judges entered the room, sat at the front table. Judges is in quotes. One wearing a sport jacket and open floral shirt and maroon bell-bottom pants, the other 2 in dark suits with ties. "Good morning," said the taller of the suited men. "This is a hearing under the provisions of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Statement of the University of New Westminster to determine whether or not there is cause for dismissal of Professors Ayub Hassan and Muriel Mayer. My name is Dr. Peter Fisher, and I am the chairman of this hearing committee, selected by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of British Columbia, following the failure of the 2 members selected by the parties in dispute to agree on a chairman." It was dull stuff, very somber. Nobody in that room was smiling or having fun. A couple of years before, the engineering students at UBC had distinguished themselves by flinging little Gabor Mate, a student reporter, through the glass of a second-floor window and down into the shrubbery. That was the worst campus violence we had seen, but now it was a few short weeks after the killing of the 4 students at Kent State. 4 dead in Ohio, sang Neil Young mournfully, and nobody doubted any longer that campus wars could have very serious consequences indeed. "How long do you suppose this is going to take?" I whispered to Ayub's student Ahor. "A week, a month, a year," he replied grimly, "however long fucking Barrington wants it to." The whole morning was spent in a dull legal wrangle about Procedia. Then Dr. Fisher looked at his watch and declared a recess until 1:30 p.m. "Come on, I'll buy you lunch," I said to the young couple. We sat down with hamburgers and cokes in the cafeteria. "Ayub's such a bloody good teacher," said Ahor. "It's incredible that the university would do this to them." "Oh, no, it's not," said the woman, Helen. "This is not a debate at the Oxford Union. This is out-and-out war. Did you see Barrington's face? He looks like a fucking angry general more than a university president. It's the corporate world trying to control the university." "Yeah, more like Oxford, Mississippi," said Ahor angrily. "Just be well-behaved little consumers and don't do any thinking," said Helen sarcastically. When the hearing resumed, Barrington's lawyer, Peter Barker, outlined his case. The charges against the professors were the same as those against Al Waldy, the same, too, that Barrington had spelled out in the suspension letter. 1. Failure to perform contractual duties. 2. Violation of duty and abuse of trust of students. Barker paused and then said quietly, "I called Dr. Hassan to the stand." Ayub went forward to testify. Technicians adjusted microphones, checked the tape recorders. "Do you wish to swear or affirm?" the hearing clerk asked him, and Ayub looked round in confusion. Muriel Mayer whispered an explanation. "I wish to swear," said Ayub solemnly, his bare toes sticking out of his Moroccan sandals. "All right, Dr. Hassan, please take the Bible in your right hand and repeat after me. I swear that the evidence I give..." "Excuse me, sir," said Dr. Ayub. The clerk looked up in surprise. "I don't wish to swear on the Bible," said Ayub. "You wish to affirm?" "I wish to swear on my holy book." "Which is that?" asked Dr. Fisher, looking over his half-frame reading glasses. "The sacred Quran," said Ayub. A murmur went through the room, and the judges conferred and then called the clerk over and sent him to find a Quran. "This is great," said Ahor. "This is really good." It took over an hour till the clerk finally returned with a Quran and handed it to Ayub, who opened it and turned a few pages and handed it back. "This is not the Quran," he said. "It says it is on the cover," the clerk replied. "The sacred Quran is in Arabic," said Ayub. "It is the only true copy of the well-preserved tablets. Such modern translations as this have no spiritual validity." After another huddle and whispered conferrings with the hearing clerk, the chairman announced an adjournment to the following day. As I drove home, someone was singing on the radio, "Stop, children, what's that song? Everybody look what's going on." Next morning, Ayub swore on an Arabic Quran and then began answering Peter Barker's questions. "I should like to ask you, Dr. Hassan, whether going, quote, on strike, unquote, was in keeping with your professional obligations towards your students." "Yes." "I see. And do you believe that you have a professional duty towards your students?" "Yes." "And by going, quote, on strike, unquote, did you fulfill that duty?" "Yes." "Let me explain. Just answer his questions, please," said Fisher. "I put it to you that by failing to teach your students, you violated that duty." Ayub stroked his beard and cleared his throat. "Mr. Barker," he said, "there are 2 points here. First of all, I did not fail to teach my students, quote, unquote." Well, allow me to finish, please. "The second point is that you have obviously not read the report of the Mackenzie Committee hearing in the case of Dr. Duplessis." "I've read it, but I'm not necessarily bound to follow its logic." "Then how can you..." "Excuse me," said Dr. Fisher. "Dr. Hassan, you are being examined by Mr. Barker. You are not the examiner." Laughter trickled round the room. Ayub nodded his head left and right and smiled, saying nothing. Barker looked at his notes and contemplated for a moment. "All right, Dr. Hassan, never mind Mackenzie. In your own mind, did you or did you not abuse the trust of your students when you failed to appear at your scheduled classes to teach them?" Ayub's short body circled in the air, hand forever grooming down the chin. He said. Then, "May I draw your attention to Funk and Wagnall's Standard College Dictionary, Canadian edition?" "No, Dr. Hassan. I asked you a question, and I would like you to answer me yes or no. This hearing does not need to have its attention drawn elsewhere. Yes or no, sir?" "Some things can't be answered yes or no." "Did you or did you not abuse the trust of your students in September of last year when you failed to teach your scheduled classes?" "This puts me in a very difficult position, sir," said Ayub, looking at Fisher. "Mr. Barker has asked me a question which taxes my understanding of the words he has used. Therefore, we must refer to a dictionary to establish a common meaning, isn't it?" "Do you have a dictionary present?" Fisher asked. No, said Ayub, but the dictionary definition is quoted in the report of Mackenzie Committee hearing, which I do have with me. Very well, proceed, said Fisher. I object, Mr. Chairman, said Barker. The respondent is evading my question. Let's hear Mackenzie before deciding that. Ayub stood up, holding the photocopied sheaf. Thank you, he said. It is paragraph numbered 22. Perhaps we could have photocopies made, said Fisher. The clerk took the document from Ayub and went off to do it. He waited, sitting with his hands together between his knees and a look of peace and vacancy on his face while the lawyers shuffled papers. When everyone had their copies, Ayub resumed. You see, sir, according to Funk and Wagnalls, abuse means to use improperly or injuriously, to misuse, or to hurt by treating wrongly, to injure. Mackenzie Committee found that none of the actions or inactions of Professor Duplessis fit this definition, because the students knew in advance exactly what was happening. Same thing is true in my case. Waving his hand behind him at the audience, Ayub said, students knew all along what I was doing or not doing. They knew why I was, publicly announced, and classes did continue in my own home. So this is not abuse, quote unquote, according to the dictionary definition. Therefore, this charge is irrelevant. He looked around the hearing room. There was no eye contact. All the lawyers were looking at paper, and the three judges were writing. All right, Dr. Hassan, said Barker eventually, let's leave abuse of trust aside for the moment. Let's look at the issue of violation of duty. When in September of last year you publicly announced that you are, quote, on strike, unquote, and following that, when you did not appear in the scheduled room at the scheduled time to teach your class in Political Studies 421, was that not a violation of your duty as a university professor? Ayub smiled sweetly at the lawyer and shook his head from side to side. Again, Mr. Barker, I refer to Mackenzie at paragraph numbered 29. I am not asking Dr. Mackenzie, Dr. Hassan. I am asking you. Please answer from your own mind and in your own words. Mr. Barker, said Ayub in a sing-song of reproach, when the very same question has already been definitively answered by Professor Mackenzie in the clearest possible language, then I can no longer answer the question in my own words without reference to Mackenzie. To do so would be a plagiarism, and that would be a violation of my professional ethics as an academic, which you are asking me to commit. Thank you for the lecture, Dr. Hassan. Could you now please answer the question? Yes, sir. I will read aloud the answer from Mackenzie. Hold on, Fisher raised his hand. The three judges conferred but couldn't agree. Robert Merivale, Ayub's nominee in the floral shirt and bell-bottoms, was sparring with Barrington's nominee in the business suit, and Fisher couldn't mediate. It's an absolute violation of his right to freedom of speech, Merivale hissed emphatically. Well, I think we had better call a halt at this juncture, said Fisher. This hearing stands adjourned until Monday, July the 6th. But the lawyers' schedules didn't fit, so after a bit of juggling, it was put over to the Monday of the following week. Back at Ayub's and Gennedy's, we held a mild celebration. You were terrific, Ayub, said Helen, the student. No, but they can't win now, said Ayub. Mackenzie has given it to us, isn't it? You don't think they can make one of those charges stick, I said. Charge about duty and trust, etc. is gone. Mackenzie has blown it away. What's left? Failure to perform contractual duties. But we taught our classes here at home, so how in the world are they going to make that one stick? Don't you hold classes sometimes in your own home, Alistair? Of course. Happens at every college and university. I even held a creative writing class in my house on Sunday nights. Exactly. Perfectly normal campus procedure. Off campus. On campus, off campus makes no difference. Fact is, we held our classes. So what are the grounds for dismissal now? I looked at his suspension letter. They're alleging 3 facts, I said. Exactly. He counted them with fingers. 1, saying publicly that we were on strike. Who can dismiss a professor for saying something? It's not cause. 2, failure to confirm that we are teaching our classes. Who can be dismissed for not writing a letter? 3, failure to teach classes. Wrong. We were teaching our classes. If you were Barker, which one of these would you try to make stick? I guess failure to confirm, I said. That has a sort of legal nicety about it. I am hired to teach classes. I am teaching classes. How is failure to talk to the dean and the academic vice president a cause for dismissal? This isn't Nazi Germany. At the very most, it would be cause for a reminder or possibly even a rebuke. Not suspension, not dismissal. Those fucking bastards, said Helen. It is Nazi Germany. They won't stop till they've completed the purge. You think so? Said Ayub with a wide grin. I don't think they've got a leg to stand on now. Not since Mackenzie. Now we are going to win. Venceremos, cried Ehor, raised his fist. But over the next few days, I could tell Ayub was worried. Again and again he said, they can't fire someone for not writing a letter, and it would be extremely unusual punishment to fire you for not writing a letter against the rules of natural justice. I didn't know how to reassure him. I had a sinking feeling things were not going to go well. When the hearing resumed, Ayub was as elusive as a fish, and Barker got more and more frustrated as he tried to corner him. Dr. Hassan, he said, please give me a one-word answer, yes or no. Did you or did you not confirm to Dr. R.G. Marshall, as requested in a letter to you dated September the 17th, 1969, that you would teach your classes? Yes or no? You see, Dr. Hassan, please, yes or no. Did you or did you not confirm that you were teaching or that you would teach your regularly scheduled classes as requested in a letter to you dated September the 23rd, 1969, from Dr. J.W. Hendry's Vice President of Academic Affairs? Yes or no? Mr. Barker, if a runner, Mr. Chairman, the witness is not being responsive to my questions. I ask that you said, excuse me, Mr. Barker, Ayub interrupted. I am trying to respond as accurately as I can to your question. Please do me the courtesy of listening to my answer. There was silence. Proceed, said Fisher. Mr. Barker, said Ayub, suppose you're a runner, running around a track, in full view of the seats in the stadium, okay? Barker looked at him in a rage, his eyes narrow, his lips tight. Now somebody says to you, can you please confirm that you are running around the track, okay? But you are very busy running. You don't have time to stop, get a pen and paper, sit down, write to confirm that you are running around the track, okay? You just keep on running, openly, in full view. Now, would you say that continuing to run like that is a confirmation that you are running? Or is that not a confirmation in your opinion? All three of the judges were smiling. Barker swallowed his anger and smiled back. Smiled too. He shook his head and then came back like a boxer. But you did not write a letter to Dr. Hendry's or to Dr. Marshall, did you? I didn't hide from them the fact that I was continuing to teach my students. Ask any of them. He turned around and gestured at the audience as though everyone in the room was one of his students. After 15 days of hearings, the committee retired to consider its findings, which the chairman promised would be released as soon as possible. What does that mean, I wonder? I asked Ayub. Oh, 2 months, 3 months, I should think. You have to buy the book to find out how it finishes. Thank you. George will answer questions. No, but I was your poem about Russia was reminding me of the thing I heard on the CBC today. Apparently the Russians have a joke that they like to play on Canadians. They like to say to Canadians, Canada, Russia, very similar, but different.